My name is Michelle Crawford. I'm the Executive Director of Circles Salt Lake. I also get to work with some wonderful people at the National Office of Circles as a regional host for the Western States of Circles chapters. I'm super grateful today because I get to take part in this conversation here at a state level, and then engage with some incredible humans at the federal level who I'll introduce now. So Kamatara is the Executive Director of Circle Salt Lake, or sorry, she's not. That's not my resignation. I hate public speaking and I'm not a moderator, but I'm not going to quit my job today. Kamatara Johnson is the Executive Director of Circles USA. Keith Barnes is I am going to read now so I don't get it wrong because I know he's Senior Director of the Beyond the Cliff Coalition through the Martha O'Brien Center and is coming to us today from Nashville, Tennessee. Kamatara came to us today from Albuquerque, New Mexico. And Scott Fast, who you'll see there, Director of Innovate and Educate, is joining us virtually from Colorado. So with that being said, Keith stepped out to lead a meeting today for a couple of hours that Kamatara and I get to be in here that's for the Beyond the Cliff Coalition. So I thought I would share with you, because Keith and I talked about this a little bit, about whether or not at this point in the day, for the last session, thank you all for staying, whether or not we really needed to define the cliff effect. But I think with some of the conversations we had today, it is helpful to hear the different variations or ideas about what the cliff effect is, and then this exciting opportunity for all of us to come together and make one definition of it with the purpose of how we want to move forward. So we're going to start first. I just wanted to fill you in. That was part of the conversation that we had while you were gone. And a lot of this today I'm hearing, which makes me, again, really excited to be a part of this wonderful coalition that's addressing the federal level of change that needs to happen, because we heard a lot of that. We've got these hands tied a little bit. But we'll start first with each of my guests. Please just briefly introduce yourself, your organization, and then describe your role in addressing the benefits cliff effect and how that ties into promoting upward mobility. We do have some slides that I'll jump to if you need. Yeah. Scott. I'm looking at him back there. So will you start for us, Scott?
Absolutely. And if you need me to show the slides, I'm happy to. Have slides instead of my face dominate that screen, so it looks way too big.
We're going to get to your slides about mid-conversation.
Well, I have a couple of Keith's as well.
You have screen share rights, so you share whatever you want, whenever you want.
Just let me know, Keith.
Okay.
Really appreciate this. In Colorado, I run a group of organizations that are addressing the journey from poverty all the way to self-sufficiency. We did not start out addressing the benefits cliff. We instead started helping people on that journey that were then impacted by the benefits cliff, and began working on changes then that would help lessen the impact of the benefits cliff. So that's what I'll be able to talk about today, is what some of the things we've done in Colorado to be able to mitigate the issues that our families were seeing.
So I am Keith Barnes. I am with Martha O'Brien Center. So just a little context. We are a faith-based nonprofit that has been located in the heart of Casey Homes, which is the largest public housing project in our state. We literally, when they built that community, we were placed in the heart of it, because we actually have been around for 130 years. In the last decade, we really started to pivot the way we approach this work. For a long time, we were sort of just a traditional social service agency, right? You have a problem, we'll come, we'll provide you that utility assistance, we'll provide you a food box, and we sent families on their way, and we realized this doesn't work. And so really a core guiding question that we have as an organization today is, what does it look like to help a family exit poverty within one generation? So working with parents, but also helping, set up that future for the kids. As we made that pivot as an organization, and Scott mentioned that too, like we didn't start from the place of like, this benefits cliff thing, this is really bad and we need to fix it. We started from a place of, how do we help families move forward? And as we did that, that's where we encountered this problem, right? The families, parents were making decisions that were against their long-term economic mobility, but made perfect sense in the near term of just putting food on the table for their kids. And it's like this math just didn't work. So we had the opportunity a couple years ago to partner with our basically our equivalent of Department of Workforce Services in Tennessee, to test an intervention. So we're now running a pilot with over 1,000 families to figure out, like, does a family-centered coaching approach, plus transitional assistance plus benefits counseling, like if we wrap these things together, connection to community resources that was mentioned earlier, if we bring all of these things together around a family as they exit assistance and increase their earnings, left out employment, obviously, like those education and training opportunities for better jobs. If we wrap all of those things together, will that help a family move forward? We started doing that work, and we realized we got a little lonesome, and we started finding other people in the country who were trying to do similar work that were also lonesome, and that's really where Beyond the Cliff came from. It's a network of practitioners, including the folks here with me and on this screen, who are earnestly trying to figure out, like, how do we fix this? How do we help families move forward? How do we envision what a system that works for families in achieving that economic opportunity? What does that really look like? So that's what brings me here today.
This is where I have a few slides. Are they able to be brought up? I have some pretty things for you to look at. All right. So my name is Kamatar Johnson, and I am coming to you from Albuquerque, New Mexico, but our national office is all over the place. There's me. I'm famous. Okay. So Circles USA has been building community to end poverty for over 25 years now. Do we have a little slideshow in the middle? I can get it.
Where you said in the center.
All right. Ooh, muy fancy. Okay. Oh, okay. So, Circles USA does have 66 chapters in 26 states. So we are a national anti-poverty initiative, and we asked the same question: how is it that we can have thriving families and thriving communities, and realize that it's all about relationships and building community, and that we have more than enough to go around. We're just doing it wrong. So how do we get together to build systems that make sense? Or how do we come together in community to know each other across difference, across class and race, and all the things that might keep us siloed and bring people together? And so we do have an anti-poverty model. We have 2 goals: that we are supporting folks, just walking alongside people who are ready, willing, and able to leave poverty behind permanently. So we do the financial coaching and connecting with community members who have the social capital to perhaps have the connections to get, all the things that you would need to be actually stable. And of course, that happens over time. So we like to say that, transformation happens at the speed of relationships, and relationships happen at the speed of trust. And so we know it's not going to be a quick fix. On average, folks are with Circles for 18 to 24 months. And there's a lot of community partnerships and wraparound services and all the things that Keith was mentioning as well. So it's a complex approach to ending poverty community by community. But our second goal is to remove the barriers that keep people in poverty, because the experts in poverty are right here, the people who have the lived experience. And so there's also a leadership development component where people with the lived experience become the best advocates in the community. And so we come together to learn more. So as far as what we've done related to the cliff effect, because we haven't been around for 130 years. Wow, we're going to try to catch up to you, Keith. But I guess just 105. Okay, we'll work on it. In the past, we've done some state commissioned research, and I have, we heard today that there was a big movement for states to understand this. We were part of that, there was a big movement to have tools. And so at a certain point, Circles USA actually even made a cliff effect planning tool, which I have to admit, in all due vulnerability, was a nightmare. And we would need an entire company to do nothing but that. And so we said, okay, we love you, but we can't. And so we're very grateful for, the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, the Georgia Center for Opportunity, LEAP Fund, like different places where that is what they do, thank goodness. So we tested out a lot of the tools. Like we got to say to the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, we love your cliff effect planning tool, the career one, the long game, but couldn't we have a snapshot tool? And they made one. It was great. So we're very grateful for some of the things that are super practical that really help, directly with the people who need help. How do you make those tough decisions? And we're so happy that Circles USA isn't doing it. So thank you for the people who are doing it. We also have a Big View policy platform, because when we listen to people with a lived experience, they say, these are the top issues we're struggling with. And then across the nation, each chapter of Circles then can try to work on those kind of campaigns or what would really help in those areas. Listening to people with the lived experience. Circles USA also makes materials that are ready to go. So I do have a one-pager here, if any of you would care for it, the one-pager that's on the screen. And there's a QR code for those of you who are fancy and just want to go right there. And there's a little video that we made too, just like a little primer video, 2 minutes or less. What's the cliff? So we're trying to create materials to raise that awareness, because it's amazing how many folks just don't know. And how do we get on the same page? And of course we have, lots of partnerships with government agencies, nonprofits, 504s that can lobby, and 501c3s that advocate, and all the hootenanny. All right, so Circles USA locally functions on 3 levels. So I'm in the national office. Circles Salt Lake is a chapter of us. So locally, what ends up happening is the immediate support, because people facing the cliff, they need help right now. They can't wait for this conference summit to be done. They need it now. And so we match people experiencing poverty with middle and upper income allies. So there's some support that way, but there are also coaches who are not case managers, but there's financial literacy and planning and SMART goals, and we see the cliff coming and we use the tools, and then folks can make a bridge plan to get across, like, how do I get to that next step? What do I need to advocate for, like what you've seen in the videos of the lived experience today. So there is that direct approach, like, yeah, people need immediate support, but there's also relationship building, so that way the policymakers can attend Circle Salt Lake and get to know, people with the lived experience, because sometimes it's so far removed, like the people who are making the decisions haven't had the experience. So getting those relationships together is really important. And then some of our chapters are also working directly with employers, so that way that understanding is happening, or there's, what are the workarounds? How can we do this together? And then also some of our chapters have micro loan programs, so that way our participants can avoid predatory lending when they are in that cliff gap that gets really ugly. So there's just all different responses that local chapters are taking to support people facing the cliff. And then of course the level 2 is that advocacy work. So, raising awareness with summits like this, and the policymakers and the relationships that we're all building to make sure that we're creating things that work without the unintended consequences. And then of course the larger question is, why are we even having this conversation at all? Could we reimagine the economy where all people thrive? One of the hardest definitions I've ever heard of poverty is that poverty is proof that the system wasn't made for me. So that's what Circles USA does, and very happy to be here today.
Thank you to all of you. Oh, thank you for doing that. Of course. This is team here for sure with us. And I know we've talked a bit about the great things that Utah has and does. And my job today certainly was to bring in some outside perspectives so that Utah can know and compare. But with Kamatara talking so brightly about what Circles does, and the 60-something chapters we have in the United States. I just want to highlight, we have 6 chapters in the state of Utah, and so shout out to Circles Weber, who's also here today. So now let's get to this definition, Keith. So as in your role of Senior Director for the Beyond the Cliff Coalition, because I know we convene and we've talked about this, so how would you, on behalf of the rest of us in the coalition, define the benefits cliff effect, and then share to why it is a critical barrier to upward mobility in your work?
Cool, thank you. Great question. I'll start with something I've learned over the last year is this is a really fuzzy term. I'm really bummed that I couldn't be in here for the full sessions because I'm sure that we've it's sort of this, we're reaching around in the dark and we've all got flashlights and we're all sort of putting definitions to the parts we're catching. And so, there's some fuzziness in the term. I appreciate Catherine, I think, actually gave us like 4 different sort of dimensions of this. And I realized why Scott said, let me know when you want to do the slides, Keith, because he inserted his slides into my slides. And this would be a great time to pull up a couple slides because it was actually, I think, your second definition. I have a slide for that because I think it gets lost. That's what I've appreciated is it gets lost because, I mean, frankly, this is such a complicated issue. Like, we've created a system that should be inflicted on no one. We are inflicting it on 100 million of our neighbors. Like, fundamentally, this is a problem of estrangement, right? Like, we're not in proper relation. Oh, sorry, I'm getting a little religious, but I won't actually preach. But we are not in right relationship with one another. And the way, so we're all trying to make sense of this overly complicated system. A lot of the ways, so I've borrowed, thank you, Georgia Center for Opportunity. I love the earnings loss rate. I think that's it's way better than marginal tax rate. It doesn't make people glaze over. And this is a really important dimension of this issue, right? It is this idea that if I get this extra dollar of earnings, it's going to cost my family 80 cents, 90 cents, 40 cents maybe, or more, right? When you see those drops, and apologies if I'm sure these have come up throughout the day, these type charts. So I think this is one important way to think about the benefits cliff, but I want to show the second slide, which maps to that second the next slide, sorry, that maps to what Catherine was talking about earlier is what we've seen is also there's this minimum basic needs thing that's happening, and we've got to figure this out. Like I don't have any immediate answers, but I know that this is part of what is going into the decision-making processes for parents. It's not just that I'm going to lose X amount of food stamps or I'm going to lose health coverage for my kids or for myself. It's that it's against this backdrop of I'm not making enough money to make up that difference. And so that basically the red line is actually, I think there was some mention earlier of some various living wage calculators. Frankly, they come with a little sticker shock, and it doesn't map with reality. Like in Nashville, and I think this is probably because we're about the same cost of living, you're looking at almost 6 figures for a family of 3. We know that inflation has been a problem, but families are getting by on less than $95,000 a year. So this, just to explain this chart, this is actually a discounted cost of living estimate. I'm using the numbers for Nashville. I double checked and made sure that we are comparable because I'm sort of presenting this in the context of actually Weber County. So that's what it costs to get. It is about $60,000 is like a reasonable cost of living estimate. And that red line goes across. The green bars, the small one, that is working full time at minimum wage in the state of Utah, which we know that that's the de juris minimum wage, right? In reality, most folks are not making that anymore. So the bar next to it, that's $18 an hour, which I'm gonna guess is pretty comparable to an entry level wage for the kinds of opportunities we would probably connect folks to. That's still halfway below that bar. And importantly, so the blue lines, those are different benefits. So that's SNAP, that's TANF, that's Medicaid. At that $18 an hour, you're now over income for you're over income for SNAP, you're over income for TANF. but you're still halfway to the actual, like, I'm getting by, I'm making ends meet, I'm, not even thriving, just paying the bills. So literally, there's only one bit child care assistance, which a lot of folks can't get because it's, it's a block grant. It's not a guaranteed thing if you're eligible. So the only benefit on here that's actually above that line is child care assistance. And I'll note the dark blue lines. I actually included CHIP for kids, and then the deepest subsidies available in the marketplace. So if you can see those blue lines that are kind of in the middle, that's for healthcare assistance. So basically, when all of those lines run out, that's when we're asking families to start pick up that full cost of whatever that assistance was. So I think that's really important for us to just keep in mind that this is what families are navigating. And then what was the second half of the question?
Well, just why the cliff is a critical barrier.
Yeah, and so the way we've sort of approached this in Beyond the Cliff is we sort of turn that on its head, and so there's these pieces, but there's a lot of other dimensions of this that we could talk about. I'll just say we're approaching it from what are the barriers to economic opportunity built into our existing public benefit system. So we sort of turned the question on its head, and so. Unfortunately, we've done a lot to do that. We're there. It's a very. I think I've heard the word complicated at least 5 times today, and I was only here for half the sessions. We built this really complex system that's very hard to navigate and it's no one's fault, right? I think it's 90 years, and I'm going to say 90. Like, it's not. A lot of folks sort of start the clock with. The Great Society in the 60s or welfare reform in the 90s, but this goes back to federal investments in a sort of a nationalized safety net, go back to the 1930s. We've been making, tax to the left, tax to the right. We've just sort of ignored things for periods of time and just let them run. And this is the system we have now, and it isn't working for families.
Thank you, Keith. While you have the floor, go ahead and take a drink of water. I'll speak this question slowly. I'm wondering if you can share examples that you know of successful programs or policies nationally that have helped to or attempted to mitigate the cliff effect. And then from there, Scott, I would love it if you will share what you all have done in Colorado.
Great question. Well, I'll just sort of, this is perhaps a heterodox opinion on kind of all sides. I've been really intentional over the last year of seeking solutions. We've brought together a lot of great partners. We have a lot of things that are very promising happening even within our network. What we haven't figured out, poverty persists, right? Like in every state in this country, nobody's figured this out yet. And I think one thing that is very needed is we need to continue to build evidence for what works. I think things that are promising is the one-door concept here in Utah, right? Like we should have a system that treats people like people and integrates those employment opportunities with basic needs, right? Like let's build up families and help them move forward. I think some other promising things I would highlight. I would be remiss not to talk about the work that is happening in Tennessee. We're testing what it looks like to provide so basic transitional assistance. I think point taken and totally agree. Like we're building evidence, right? We might get to the end of this and say, that didn't work. But we are seeing some promising results that if you make those investments in families, it helps them move forward. The Benefit Bridge initiative in Ohio is another sort of newer initiative that's very much focused on helping families that are exiting public assistance, and it does that coaching approach. It does support connecting to community resources, as well as sort of, I heard the term behavioral economics before. It's some brain-based sort of incentivization. So providing financial rewards for the behaviors that we families want and we want to help them achieve. I think those are just a handful of things I would highlight. Obviously, like Colorado is going to share a lot of the work they're doing, but I want to reinforce, and this is something for us, is we just really need to make sure that we're being rigorous in our evidence building and our evaluation of our efforts, because we've been doing this for 90 years, and we still haven't figured it out yet.
Thank you, Keith. And so, Scott, if you'll share with us some examples of what you've done in Colorado, and then I would also love if you would share or add to that, are there any key lessons, takeaways in the work that you all have done that can inform other states and, of course, specifically Utah in what we're trying to do?
Before I get into Colorado, I'll mention one other from Vermont, in that there is some work that's going on with TANF recipients that is incentivizing them to stay in work and make sure they get enough money then that they will be able to be okay as they're getting those entry-level jobs. So there's the good news is that we have lots of different pilots, and you guys can decide which one may be right or make up your own, right? So, and that's kind of what the work I'm going to show in Colorado actually is. Make sure, there we go, is across many years. We expanded childcare support very high. In my opinion, it may even be too high. It's up to 85% of the area median income. That means that the impact, if someone gets close to losing childcare, they're not going to earn more, because they're going to have to pay a significant amount more than the additional income that they're going to have, right? So that's a big reverse incentive. We took that off the plate in general, but as you probably could expect, that means that some of our budgets are a little bit tight, and we are just getting back to the point where next year we may have some waiting list, which we have not had with childcare for quite some time. So we're still trying to balance out what's the right maximum amount, but it's certainly extending childcare to the point where a family is comfortably living while they are going through the benefits cliff. I think everyone, or almost everyone's raised SNAP to 200% FPL. That was critical because we find now that there are very few cliffs with losing SNAP. The only way that you have a cliff is if you have very high housing costs. If you don't, then you actually lose SNAP prior to it ending at 200% of the federal poverty level. We, in the process of working with families, and this is where when we started using the cliff calculators, we noticed that the way that our child care copay went, it went up very fast when someone went through the 130% of the federal poverty level, right when they were losing Medicaid and some other things. It went up very, very fast. We needed to rework that. So we worked with the Department of Human Services. They recognized it because they have a family voice council. Their families were bringing this up to them, and we were able to partner with them on changing the local policy so that it only goes up on average of 14 cents for every dollar more you earn in income above the 130% of the federal poverty level. It really made that a much more affordable change. The final thing I'll mention is that, and Keith will probably talk about this some as well, is that taxes paid and the tax credits are a significant part of the help for families. As their incomes are going up, the tax credit is going down very quickly, the earned income tax credit for a period of time. If the state has an earned income tax credit, then we were able to expand ours in Colorado. And that's a significant way because that does not count against qualifications for other benefits programs. It's one of the most impactful way to get families actual money. The negative is that they get a big refund check once a year, and they have to budget very wisely because that benefits comes in only once a year, and then they have to pay every month. They may not be making enough money to cover their expenses every month. But those are the four key items that have happened over the last, it's now been 10 years making this work. And those have really impacted a lot of our families very positively. Kate, do you want to jump in on any other policies before we?
Thanks, Scott. Well, I will highlight on the EITC, that is one area where there is some, I mean, obviously that is not a perfect program either, but there is some evidence that not only sort of in the near term promotes labor force participation, increases work effort, but also in the long term promotes sort of that intergenerational economic mobility. So I would definitely one up on the EITC component there. To Scott's point, and I'm trying to remember, there is at least one jurisdiction that actually is at least exploring sort of a periodic or an advanced EITC. If that's of interest, I can definitely answer that question offline. I wish I could find it in my head, but yeah, and actually I want to say there's some that are doing it sort of as a retrospective. So you've essentially already earned the EITC from last year and you're getting it as a monthly payment prospectively. Okay, I'm using those words wrong, but you're getting it not in advance, but in retrospect. And then I think there's at least one jurisdiction that's actually doing it prospectively, where they're giving it to you in advance. So that can help sort of offset that. Okay, you're losing the assistance, but now we're making up that basic needs gap, and incentivizing that work effort.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you, Keith. Kamatara, in your work at the national level and working then across the country with the different Circles chapters, can you share what you've learned or heard from our chapters about what systemic barriers make addressing the benefits cliff particularly difficult? And then are there any specific industries or populations that keep coming up at the national level as disproportionately affected?
Well, I think we've already heard a lot of that today, that, the whole system is just this, it's been Frankensteined together over, 9 decades. And, I use the example of an adobe house, so I'm going to go very Southwest on you here. So it's like, oh, we had a baby, blah, you add a room. Oh, we had a baby, blah, add a room. And then at a certain while, after a while, you're like, wow, the heat doesn't get to this part of the house and it leaks here and this door opens backwards, and then no, this is 2 levels instead of 1 and now we can't. So I think some of the trouble is it is complicated. People do give up hope, whether at the policy level or at the recipient level, because it's emotionally overwhelming. It can be really devastating. It's so complicated. Like, even my first career was as a teacher, so welcome to the working poor. And I absolutely was on food stamps and WIC and all the things, even though, I went to school and did all the right things. And how do I take off of work and get my kids to childcare, and I have to go to a case manager in this office, that office, here, all over the place. And I was in Wisconsin. Thank you, Tommy Thompson. And one of my first jobs was in the Kenosha County Job Center, which was a one-stop shop. You drop your kids off and when you first walk in, and then there's the subsidized lunch counter, and then here's every case manager of every program you could ever imagine. It was like an indoor mini mall, and it was amazing. And I worked in the adult education center helping people with GEDs and ESL and resumes, and then the workforce development was in there too, and immigration and social security, and like you name it, it was in this building. And of course, within a year or two, the government was like, hey, let's shut that down. So it doesn't exist anymore. But that was in the early 90s. So what's tricky is that, there are great ideas, and then it feels like, okay, we just get it going. We're like, the left hand's talking to the right hand, and we're streamlining it, and this is great, and people are using it, and then all of a sudden the funding gets pulled, or we get the political pendulums that are going like, okay, we're going to step to the right. And then we get things set up, and they're like, oh, just kidding, we're going to step to the left. And then things get undone and dismantled and redone and rebaked, as opposed to, could we all come together? Because we all want the same thing. We all want thriving families. People want to work. They want to have a deep sense of meaning and belonging. They want to contribute. They want to volunteer and help at Girl Scouts and 4-H and have time to be at their kids' schools and go to parent-teacher conferences and things like that. But you can't do that if you're working 3 jobs. So I just feel like everything is so disconnected. And that's probably the biggest barrier, whether it's disconnection like the actual system itself, or people trying to use the system, or people trying to reform the system, or the policymakers actually talking to people with a lived experience. It's all that divide and conquer. It's just so separated. And the second half of that question about the specific industries that are impacted and the particular populations, this is where we're getting the frontline workers, we're getting the ALICE population. So just to use that term for the United Way, that's asset limited income constrained employed, ALICE, which is probably a much more polite way of saying the working poor, just to be a little PC, right? But definitely, it's the low wage sector. So it's the folks that are hitting that danger zone, like, okay, I'm in that $15 to $20 an hour range or less. We're hitting that pocket where, the economic mobility just stops. Like, I'm working, and then I just hit a block like, thou shalt not pass. This is it. You can get this far, and then everything just stops, and I can't make it over that. So, you're looking at retail, hospitality, food service, a lot in the healthcare industry, like child care workers, elder care workers, the CNAs, the food service, hospital workers, and of course the seasonal workers and people who are part of the gig economy gets really tough. And so, the people who are hit the hardest, especially we see this in circles a lot, single moms, and we love our dads, so we're not dissing on our dads, but the biggest demographic we serve are single moms, and then of course women and people of color are disproportionately impacted, and then people in rural communities, and I grew up in the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin, so I get the idea of there's no transportation, there aren't services out here. I can't drive to Madison or Milwaukee. I'm way out there a piece, hey, it's out there. So I can't get to that stuff. So the rural communities are really impacted. And then also, immigrant and refugee populations. It's just, people falling between the cracks every which way. And then folks not even knowing, oh, there is a service for that. Wait, I could get help, or what? And then with the rugged individualism, like, I have to do this myself, or I'm bad, I'm wrong. I mean, I can't tell you how much it impacted me personally to be like, I got my scholarship, I went to college, I am a school teacher, why am I on WIC? It was so devastating emotionally, it's so punitive, it's so degrading, it just was so hard, and it took me, 2.5 decades to get out of that through the slog, and because of my privilege and because of, I did have some social capital through, church or some middle class friends, so I was like borderline. But for folks that are only in low income with low income friends in a low income neighborhood with a low income, how do you get the connections that get you to that next level? So just all the fragmentation is incredibly hard to work around.
For that. I'm going to stick with you for a minute and then have Keith and Scott chime in after. But I think it's extremely notable, and we've heard it throughout the day today, how important community is. We've partnerships, and we've talked about coaching, right? And so DWS has coaching. They have programs that you can start with eligibility and then connect with a job coach, which is incredible. How many people are DWS? Not enough, right? It doesn't matter. There's so many needs and so many levels. And so what I love about Circles, obviously, yes, of course I'm biased, but there's a reason why I volunteered for 5 years and then jumped from corporate to nonprofit to lead my chapter. It is that building community. It really is the village that we build around people. So while the employees at DWS are working closely to crunch the numbers and memorize eligibility and try to navigate all of that, because But what got me today, Kevin, was I know that the families that we together serve are navigating these really complicated systems. But so are you, and so are your team, right? Oh my good, the notes, that's the only notes I took today. Oh, maybe if I can write all this down and then have it to reference, I don't have to call your team and be like, tell me again how this works. So I want to talk about what we've heard with partnerships, with community, how we bring people together. Can you tell me, Commentar, how do you see these sectors? So we've got government, we have nonprofits, private sector. How do you see those sectors coming together to really accomplish the goal that we're all after, which is upward mobility and thriving families in the U.S.?
Some folks would call that a collective impact approach, if you're familiar with that term. If you're not, it's a great thing to look up on YouTube and just say, what is collective impact, and watch a primer video on it. But it's basically a radical collaboration across sectors, and it's at the heart of what Circles does, and it sounds like it's at the heart of what a one-stop shop would do. But I also, Kevin, understood with great pain and empathy how, we've got square pegs and round holes, and we're trying to build a square filter to go in the round holes, the Apollo 13, right? So there's things that don't always fit and go together, but we're doing the best we can. So that kind of collaboration that brings together, philanthropy and business and education and healthcare, and how do we get the whole community to pitch in together around this hard, gnarly problem? But even deeper than that is, how do we build the relationships? Because when I know an individual who is experiencing this, I might respond much more, I'm going to respond differently than if I just see some numbers. And the numbers and statistics are really important. They are, because I got to show evidence that this is real. And to hear how it impacts people's lives is really important. So at least in Circles, we're that safe place to bring people together across all different boundaries, and people that would never otherwise be together perhaps come together to serve the meal, to meet with the circle leaders, which is what we call people who are leaving poverty behind permanently in Circles, because they are leading their lives and expanding the circles of their lives. So bringing people together across difference to learn more and co-create is really powerful, and that's what builds the community. If we have a deep connection to each other and a sense of meaning and belonging and care, that we don't just you drive into your driveway, if you have one, and the garage door goes up, and you pull in your car and the garage door closes, and you never meet your neighbors. So how do we get an individualized perception of each other while we work on this together? So in addition to the cross-sector collaboration, so we all are working in concert together, I think the best partnership I've seen with Circles is really working not only with policymakers, but directly with employers. So I've just been so shocked at how many employers really have no idea what's going on with their frontline workers. So when Circles establishes a healthy, respectful relationship with employers, to just private door, not public, private door, have some conversations like, hey, let's talk about what your workers are going through. Hey, do you know how much it costs to live here? And where are your workers living? How's the transportation going for them? Where do they have childcare? And just to little by little, again, relationships over time, how do we get folks to understand and then have that different mindset and make the accommodation, streamline the application process, have a line of sight for advancement at that workplace? What are the workarounds? Could there be on-site childcare? Could there be second shift childcare? Could there be childcare vouchers? If you can't raise the rate, are there other things you could do? But then also knowing that support is in place. So for the worker, is getting the support to not just say, oh yeah, I'm not going to go today.
With Circles and coaching and the allies and things that we have in place, they call their ally and says, oh, my truck broke down, I can't get to work. Okay, let's figure out a way to get you there. So with extra support on both sides, it's like we're all coming together to solve this big, gnarly problem.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that for all of us who speak this language and do this work daily, it's very easy to forget that not everybody speaks this language or does this work. It's very easy to forget that employers
are a lot of the times left in this place of complete confusion and unknown. I just offer somebody more hours. I know she's single with kids at home, and she said no, right? Or I want to reward the performance of this incredible employee with the promotion, and they told me no. And sometimes, and this is what we've heard from employers, sometimes it's not just that somebody declines that opportunity, they don't come back the next day. They're humiliated. They don't want to have to explain why I did not take that, because then I have to tell you that I'm receiving assistance and I'm embarrassed, and I won't be able to make it. And so what I love about what you get to do is to hopefully connect with the employers to say, how can you craft the right questions? I love to say, refer them to circles, right? Because then I get to ask them the questions that the employer probably can't, right? Employers are in a tough spot. You can't come out and say, are you receiving benefits? Are you not getting child support from an absent parent? You know, employers have lines that they can't cross just the same. So I appreciate that you bring that up, and we just have to remember that sometimes we just have to prompt those conversations ourselves or make sure that people understand that not everybody knows what we know. And there are some really tough situations that employees and employers are in. So,
And also to support the employees to advocate, you know, being able to have a voice, being seen and heard, to be able to ask questions. I didn't know I could ask for things. So I would just say, well, why bother? Or just, it feels so futile. It's so overwhelming. It's so hard, and I'm going to give up on why bother? So to have the support to get beyond that and to speak up and to have the conversation, that takes a lot of support, a lot of community partners to be able to have those hard conversations.
and that's where I get silly about the work that we do, because I was fortunate to work for a husband-wife team who very quickly understood why I cried when the husband asked me why I was late again. All right, single mom, 3 kids, and one day I just couldn't take it anymore, and I broke down. I was like, listen, this is my life. I don't want to be late. And I just was at a breaking point, and even though it was embarrassing, you know, said, hey, listen, so-and-so doesn't have any children at home, and she's not opening the office. Is there any reason why we can't switch that one, you know? And he fumbled. He didn't know what to do because I was crying. So he called his wife in the next office and was like, help me, Michelle's crying. But she came in and we had a conversation. And from there, I didn't open the office anymore. And I got some flexibility coming in the morning. So it wasn't stressful. My sweet kids didn't have to see mom, you know, so stressed out every morning dropping them off at school. I got to smile and send them off with love instead of like, you know, go run. But, you know, which was really great. But from that, I learned that I had a very incredible, unique opportunity from an employer who wanted to listen to me and invested in me. And where I said I get silly is that from that experience of my own, that when I'm working with the families in circles, I get to teach them to advocate for themselves. What is your worth? In their reminders that they keep, we do something where we have them list their accomplishments at their employer. So when it's time for an annual review and they've met with their DWS employment counselor saying, you're right up against a cliff, right? And let's start talking about the programs that are available to you or the assistance you can go to help mitigate that for the few months until your raise really kicks in. And then we're talking to them about what happens when you get this opportunity. Let's go back to your list, because you might have forgotten. It's now your annual review. You might have forgotten 9 months ago how you learned that new skill at work or how you did this really great thing. And so all of us combined together can help these families understand that what their value is, what their worth is, to advocate for themselves. And here are all the tools that you have now. And some people just need to be told that they have value, that they have worth, and that they get to advocate for themselves. And it's magic. Okay, I see. This is why I moderate and don't respond, because I'll talk. I love it, and then we'll talk for Dix. Scott, I feel like we're missing you there on the screen. Would you add anything to either notable partnerships between sectors or just your take on the importance there?
Let me share one thing quickly here. And the whole thing is that this is really a very strong return on investment for taxpayers. So when we are starting to talk with people about how this should work, we actually can go in and on this left side here, this is a calculation in Colorado. This is how it comes together. As someone's moving from 100% of the federal poverty level to 131%, it's about a $3,000 raise. So taxpayers each year after that $3,000 raise, if that family continues to earn that $3,000 more, taxpayers each year save $2,532 for every year that those kids are in childcare. So there are some things we think we can do to shift the conversation and say, hey, the family's a little bit better in this situation, but they're not that much better, so can we help them a little bit more? And oh, by the way, it's not just helping families, it's actually saving money for all of us, and then we can redirect that to money to some other thing. And this change of $3,000 is not that much for most of the workforce development programs. So can we partner with workforce development programs to say, hey, we've got a good family here that's really working hard, but we want to get them to that next level. Can we start to think about these things together? And maybe it is worth $3,000 investment to get that credential, because we're going to save $2,500 a year every year thereafter. So we're starting to see some real progress in the discussions we're having around how everyone, by helping address this, how it benefits everyone, including the families and taxpayers. And we're happy to work with. I don't think we have enough time to go through it. We have an initial ROI calculator, return on investment calculator, that we're piloting right now, and we'd love to work with people to help you understand how much these type of changes could impact your local budget.
Thank you, Scott. We might know tech, so we'll see. We'll save that one for sure. Keeks, is there anything you would add to this?
I mean, honestly, I sort of answered it a little bit in the beginning of, we're not in the right relationship. But honestly, I think Kamatara spoke to so much of this needs to be a whole of community thing, I think, and particularly employers, right? Like, families need those economic opportunities in the United States that, the American green hand is on good jobs. So I would just reinforce the importance of having employers at the table, making sure that our workforce systems are responsive to them. I would say we need to explore earn and learn type opportunities, right? So that we're getting folks engaged in the workforce, but at the same time we're building those skills so that there's that progression. And then we have to figure out this benefits cliff thing, because it doesn't really help you if you get that next rung up and bam, you're more in assistance. So I think that's what I would add.
Oh my goodness. So a little bit of return on investment. I'm just saying. So used to be on the speech and debate club, so I don't want to extrapolate, something and say, you can do wild things with data that are very naughty. But even if you just contemplate, like, do a thought experiment for a minute and take an avatar of, like, the average single mom. And let's say I'm, 30 years old, just way younger than I am. But let's pretend that I'm 30 years old and I've got my kids and I'm a single mom. And now, say I'm with Circles or the Martha O'Brien Center, or I'm in Colorado, and at age 40, I leave poverty behind permanently. Now, really hold on to that word, permanently. I leave poverty behind permanently. Oh, God, y'all like it? Take it on. Okay, so now contemplate that number. If I live to an average life expectancy, I don't remember what it is, it's like 80, whatever. So let's say I got 50 more, 40. I got 40 more years of life where I am now contributing to the tax base. I am not on government assistance. I am working. I feel a deep sense of being and belonging. I can go, engage with my family. I can do things in the community. I'm contributing, and I love where I live, and I'm happy, like all the things. How do you quantify that? Like, how do you put a value on that? Because there's the money that I'm not receiving from the government. There's the money I am making that goes back into, I'm a consumer. I can afford to buy a car, house, food, and all those things. And plus, it's like the hours of that all the employees at DWS I don't need to go visit them now. I don't need to use their hours. I don't need to use their time. So it's like decreased use of government. It's like, it just goes on and it's exponential. And now think about my babies. When my kiddo gets to be, 19, 20, 21, and is not on government assistance. So now it's generational. So first you get to multiply my ROI by 40, if you figure it out for 1 year. And now how do you do that for my kids after and the kids after that? So I can't give you a number, but if you just do the thought experiment, it's exponential. So when folks start saying, it's too expensive, I would really challenge that notion. I do agree that there are ways we can streamline it and do it better, and there are really some wacky, taffy things that are happening where money is going down the drain. Yes, but that doesn't mean that getting people out of poverty permanently is too expensive. Just saying.
No, that's okay. I love it because I'm like, can somebody give me a number that I can times by infinity, right? If we break the cycle. Keith, you want to add anything to that?
I think that is what's it.
How much time would it take to look at your fancy ROI calculator?
Provided it will not take very long, and I can show this to you as opposed to what we're taking is a relatively simple approach. I'll show you the data that we're collecting.
Thank you.
And the approach. So, and the way it's working is based off the initial circle calculator. And then we're going through and saying, okay, if we have the data that we can collect at the beginning of an intervention. So if we know that the household size and the ages of the dependents, right, and the number of the dependents, and if we're able to just ask what the income is at the beginning of the intervention. So we, through all those other calculators that we've talked about, we generally know how much, with those information, how much TANF the person will qualify for, SNAP, child care, housing, and healthcare. So those are the big 5 support programs. What we're seeing is just by looking at those 5, if you can increase that income just $2,000 or $3,000, the program pays dividends for years in the future, right? So we just need to collect that information. So if you're able to ask that, or if you have the information around that about how much that is, that's wonderful. Most people actually don't, even if they have Medicaid, for instance, how much is that worth? It's not something that the family's going to have any idea. So we have estimates around how much healthcare is being covered for, let's say two earners and two young kids. We're able to calculate tax credits and taxes paid. And then at the end of the intervention, if you just say, okay, after the intervention, and Circles is excellent about this, right? So what's happening now for you? From an income perspective, how much did it go up? I think with Circles, it went up, it goes up 45-50% in that time frame. What are the benefits that you still have if you're able to ask it? That's all the information that's needed. If you don't ask it, we can calculate it. And then you just understand what's the overall cost of the intervention. And then once you can do that, and you look at, even in the first 2 years, we're generally seeing that a moderately costing intervention that raises someone's salary pays for itself within a couple of years. And then that family is going to continue to save money in the future. So I'll stop there, and that's the type of stuff we're happy to work with people, with organizations to see if they can do some of these things.
Incredible. Thank you, Scott. Keith, if you could change one thing about the way benefits are structured in the U.S., what would it be and why? And I already know you can't do one, so.
No. Could I like 10? I can do easily do things. I can just do.
Semi-fold and dash.
Honestly, I mean, some of these things got spoken to earlier. I mean, first of all, we need to listen to the folks who are experiencing this. That is a critical point. But also within that, we need to give states the flexibility. I've heard super waiver, state, we need flexibility to innovate here. And then within that, we need the robot, like randomized control trial tight evaluation to make sure that, what we're doing is working, because this is taxpayer dollars, right? And it's not just taxpayer dollars, it's families' futures. So we owe it to those families, we owe it to one another to make sure that we're getting this right. So I think, again, let's create more flexibility to test. We know what we have isn't working. Let's test better solutions, model it, test it, pilot it, scale it based on what we learn from the evidence.
Thank you. Scott, could you name one thing? If not, you can name a few, but if you could change the way the benefits system is currently structured, what changes would you make?
I would focus on the EITC and getting it paid on a quarterly or monthly basis to the families. Because when you listen to families and they get one big refund once a year, and then the rest of the months they're on payday loans because they don't have enough income to cover their costs. If we could actually just make that change, it would be a significant impact on families.
Fantastic. Thank you. Commodore.
Well, it's not the old English teacher in me says, go back to Greek mythology. And remember your favorite Hydra monster? It's the one with all the heads. I feel like the cliff effect, like you slay one head and another one comes up, and you slay a head and another one comes up. So, yeah, there really isn't one solution to it, but if there were that way to streamline the way the system works with that human-centered design so it can maintain the dignity of the people who need it, that would be amazing. And so if there were a functional, one-stop shop, that would be amazing. Like one foreman, one case manager, and one, all of that, pull it together, so it could be possible to go through and go out. So, and I know that's waving the magic wand, but then it's like you actually kill the heart of the beast instead of just slashing out the heads.
I believe in magic. You do? Okay, I'm going to do this last question that I would like the three of you to each give your take on, and then we'll open it up for questions, and then maybe even get to get out of the room before. Did I hear sad people were coming in? Is that? Wait, should we do a hug light for those who come to He is like, stay away. Don't. So, okay, Scott, let's start with you. What actionable steps can individuals, organizations, and policymakers take to support solutions to the benefits cliffs? This is where y'all want to take notes based on your role. And maybe we're repeating, but I would love to hear. So, what actionable steps would you put out there to the world?
Yeah, definitely. We are happy to sit down and plan this out with you. So please reach out. If you are seeing some of these that you are interested in, we'd love to have input from your families and just sit down with you and say, hey, we've got some of this data, we've got some of these processes. Which of these are most important, do you think are most important in impacting your families? I'd encourage you to talk to your families, as Keith said beforehand, just to make sure. So that to me is very actionable. The other action is if you're working with employers, ask them some of the things that we've already mentioned. Have you talked to someone that's showing up habitually late to work? Do you know why? Walk around your parking lot. How old are the cars? What's the shape of the tires? So does it look like it's reliable? So think about what's going on with your employees that are the lifeblood for your producing what you do and making the money that you do. Go out and just gain understanding, and talk to them, ask them these issues. Those are two things I would do.
Those are two incredible things, Scott. Thank you so much. And before I move on to the others, because you have offered a couple of times for folks to get in touch with you, do you want to throw up some contact information on the screen whenever you have that ready and how you want them to do it?
I have that we have it, so I'll change to that right now while you guys are talking.
Thank you. Amatara, give us some action steps.
relationships. It's all, and I know that's at the heart of what Circles does, but building relationships. You need to know your neighbors, your policymakers, the people who are running workforce development, the beautiful bureaucrats like Kevin. I love you. So you explained it very well. I learned so much from you. And the more that we listen and understand what's going on in reality, lived reality, then we can get to those amazing solutions and at the same time be working on the beloved community that we know we all want.
Thank you.
It's hard to follow Kamatara. Like everything you do, it's just a mic drop. But don't. I want to do it. Don't retire. Yeah, don't drop the mic. But I ditto, right? Well, let me back up and say thank you to everyone for being here. I think that's really the first step is, you cared enough to be here. You're getting educated on the issue. Many in the room are already taking actions to improve the lives of families. And that's really the first step, right? Is like, let's understand the issue and in partnership with families and understanding what they're navigating. Let's create a better system. Yeah, look at that. Thank you, Scott. I didn't realize that it appeared at the back, but I was about to point back and say, hey, could you throw up? So that's our newsletter. I don't trust QR codes because you never know where it's going to take you. This one I'll vouch for. It's just a nice little newsletter sign up so you can keep in touch with the Beyond the Cliff work. But to ditto what Scott said, if we can be helpful, I didn't really mention this earlier. Our coalition, so we have 13 partners at the table currently. We have state agencies, we have county governments, we have workforce providers, we have social service providers. So we have this cross section. So regardless of whether you're coming from government today, or academia, or where, obviously, or nonprofits, we can connect with you and figure out how to, as we sort of open up the coalition, figure out how to plug you into this larger collaborative. Because our number one thing is we want to figure out what works, and we want to see that change happen within our policies, within how we're operating our systems, so that families can move forward, so that they have that access to the American dream.
And imagine if we were all rolling in the same direction. Just saying. So I'm gonna go all analog on me. I have business cards. No, they're on paper. And I also do have, if you didn't catch the QR code earlier, I do have some copies of the one-pager on the PIP effects. On the front, there are some definitions and pretty picture type things. And on the back, there are some key talking points that are for community members, employers, and public officials. So there's just helpful. This is what we give to our local chapters to be advocates, but you're welcome. It's all on our website, or you can take some paper things as well. So I'm very grateful that y'all are here today.
So in all honesty, I didn't give Scott enough time to be here physically in person, but so he has nothing in my mind to make up work. I feel like if there was, made up for it, because we did not ask him to have all this ready. But this is team, right? This is collaboration. This is when you bring people together with a focus and a shared goal. So thank you, Scott, so very much. With that being said, last stretch. Does anybody have any questions?
I just wanted to say thank you, first of all, to everyone who came today. But when you talk about collective impact, it touched my soul, because that's how I first met Michelle and how she became connected with all of our work. So it's true, the relationships are critical. We have to really feel like we're in this together. So thank you.
So Alexis, for those on the other side of the room, said absolutely yes to collective impact. And I'm super grateful to have met you too, because that's probably why I'm in this seat today. So thank you, Alexis. Questions, comments, feedback? Yes, Nick.
I'm an employer, and I'm just curious. I'm curious if any of you have seen, what have you seen in anywhere across the country that's really effective at helping employers come to the table? Specifically, are there pieces of information or tools or resources that help employers feel like they can engage on this issue that isn't just about beating them up? Or, we've heard from employers that are maxed, they're stressed, their bandwidth is topped out, and they're facing really serious workforce shortages. So how do you bring the private sector to the table in a way that they feel helped in coming to the conversation? What have you seen successful in that regard?
I actually have seen one thing that was really powerful with Circles, Sauk Prairie, which is kind of rural Wisconsin, southwest of Madison. They held a morning retreat, kind of like a day work session with local employers, and they talked about retaining workers with a lived experience of poverty, because we talk about the phantom workforce, the people who would, could, should be working, but for a variety of reasons are not, or they are job light, as you might say. And so working privately with a group of employers to first off just say, like, how do people, to do like the assessment, how do people apply for your jobs? How do they get in? Is there a line of sight for advancement? How are people supported as they do the line of sight, as they go up? And then, do you know the danger zone, that window where, hitherto shalt thou come with but no further. And then they're off the path. So if you know certain, like, what are your workers struggling with? So doing that kind of private assessment, so it's not public, but in a supportive way, and multiple employers in the room, because a lot of them really are struggling, and employers have never been so amenable and cooperative that we've experienced in the last 2 decades. Like, people are very open to learning and being open to sharing. So when they can hear from other employers, oh yeah, we're having the same thing, or oh, I didn't think about filling out a job application on your phone, and you're trying to make it bigger, and it's all the boxes that you can't do on your phone, and you don't have any other access to internet other than that. So, or the AI that's bumping people out of the application flow. I don't know if any of you have looked at that, but there's a lot of AI programs that bump people out of the online applications. So the employer doesn't even see a whole bunch of people who applied because they've got systems that are bumping them out. So yeah, like days of retreat with employers and like community building with the local employers is really effective. And for them to know that there's support for their employees outside of the workplace is a really good partnership, but to do it in a non-threatening, uplifting, assets-based, life-affirming way, because we're not out to trash anyone. We want to be able to work together. Like we want to get everyone on the bus. We don't want to run them over with the bus. But do you have some examples?
I mean, a very practical tool that has some promise that I've come across, and I know AEI has some things on this, is the employer resource networks. That's a really cool model that allows, so it's not Benefits Cliff specific, but it is about sort of equipping resources sort of within the work context to help your employees who might be encountering cliff effects. So I'd highlight that. I would, I think the other piece is, there is a tendency and sometimes to beat up, and I think it's important that we all we're all just human here, and we're doing the best we can, and that's the approach that we've taken. We do have kind of locally to the Beyond the Cliff initiative within Martha O'Brien Center. We're engaging employers, and it's really just educating them on it, because there's just this information gap, and a lot of times they just didn't even know, and so I think that's important, is just taking that first step of education, helping employers understand what their workers are navigating.
The thing I'll say just real quick, in case it's a knock-on question, is that if you ask employers, are they struggling with retaining people that make less than $25 an hour? They're going to go, yes. Almost all of them will. And they say, do you realize that many of them are impacted by the benefits cliff? They're going to go, what is the benefits cliff? And then there's a video that you can give them for 2.5 minutes and they'll explain that. I think we've seen that work to introduce employers in a non-threatening way very well.
I think the LEAP Fund did a I think the LEAP Fund did a pilot program with employers in New York State where they were trying to figure out ways that they could offer alternative resources, and that's coming to an end, right? And so hopefully we'll get some good data and evaluation from how that went, which could be helpful and replicate.
Okay, so I do see that there's some people ready to come in.
Don't you love like the confidence of a faculty member just walks in and goes, this is the
I wish they would have taken the
They're
seat.
like, shut the door. Catherine, you have something you need to say? You've got 30 seconds to say it. Damn, girl. That's it, you're done. You should see these people out in the hallway.
No, just a few things, because I know we're all here today to like move the work forward. So a couple things that probably some of you in the room know about, but I was really excited about, is that the feds, ACF, what does ACF stand for? Do you guys tell us?
Administration for Children and Families.
Thank you. They are putting together a waivers and flexibilities resource. And so I understand that like the top brass are kind of looking at it next week, so hopefully this can actually get released soon. So I just thought that was really cool. And then also, as some of you might know, the University of Wisconsin just put out an RFP for benefit cliffs research. What was that? Oh, Badgers. And so $50,000 per project. You have to have a terminal degree and you have to be affiliated with the university. But Utah needs to get on that. So very cool. That was it.
Thank you, Catherine. Okay, and Scott, come with her and Pete. Thank you so much.